My cheating wife tried to ruin me, but her parents gave me everything instead, $2 million inheritance drama. My wife, Jocelyn, who's 27, and I, 29, had been married for just over a year when I decided to file for divorce. The reason? I discovered she was cheating on me with one of her co-workers. Oddly enough, it wasn't me who uncovered the affair, it was actually my in-laws who brought it to my attention and encouraged me to take immediate action and end the marriage. Jocelyn is an only child, and her parents, Frank and Leah, are incredibly wealthy. They own a massive pharmaceutical company, which has been their family's pride and joy for years. Jocelyn and I first met about 3 years ago through a dating app, and we instantly clicked on our first date. After a year of living together, I decided to propose, and before long, we were married. Her parents were the kind of people you'd want to know. Frank and Leah were warm, down-to-earth, and remarkably humble, considering their immense wealth. From the very first time I met them, they treated me as if I were part of their family. Jocelyn would often joke that I was the son they never had, and honestly, it felt like that too. They welcomed me with open arms and never made me feel like I was an outsider. Coming from my background, this was something I deeply appreciated. I grew up in a household that was far from happy. My parents didn't love each other but chose to stay together for my sake, which only led to constant arguments and a tense atmosphere. Neither of them was particularly affectionate, and even now, though I stay in touch with them, our family dinners feel more like a chore than an occasion. In contrast, Jocelyn's family felt like a breath of fresh air. They were warm, caring, and genuinely interested in me as a person. I felt at ease with them in a way I never did with my own family. So, it was a shock when Frank and Leah chose to stand by me after discovering Jocelyn's betrayal, even to the point of offering to name me the heir to their estate, a staggering $2 million inheritance. This is where my dilemma begins. Accepting this money feels like a betrayal of Jocelyn, despite her infidelity. At the same time, it's not something I ever expected, and it's an opportunity that could change my life. Jocelyn is furious about it, and while I understand her anger, it's hard to ignore the fact that her parents are the ones offering this to me. Still, I'm torn. It's her family's fortune, and it feels like I'm stepping into a mess I didn't ask for. I had my lawyer take a look at everything, and it's clear that accepting this offer would leave Jocelyn with nothing. It's a huge amount of money, life-changing, really, but the thought of taking it stirs up all kinds of conflicting emotions. To make things even harder, Jocelyn and I always had a strong, loving relationship, or at least I thought we did. Sure, we had our disagreements, but we always managed to work things out. So when her parents invited me over for a private conversation and revealed the affair, it completely blindsided me. Jocelyn works for her dad's company and handles recruitment, so she's in a senior role. Her parents had noticed that she was spending an unusual amount of time with one of the new hires, a guy who had just graduated college and was barely 21 years old. The age gap was weird enough, but what really disgusted me was the idea that she would look for love outside our marriage when I thought we were happy. At first, her parents tried to brush it off as a close friendship. They even asked her about it directly, but Jocelyn assured them it was strictly professional. Still, they were concerned. Not only was this bad for our marriage, but it also put the company at risk. If things went south between Jocelyn and this guy, he could easily turn around and sue them, considering she was his boss. Despite their repeated warnings to keep things professional, Jocelyn kept meeting this guy outside of work. Her parents wanted to believe her, but eventually, it became impossible to ignore the signs. They felt they had no choice but to intervene, and that's when they decided to tell me everything. Frank and Leah decided to take matters into their own hands. They hired a private investigator to keep tabs on Jocelyn, which wasn't a problem for them financially. The detective soon uncovered that Jocelyn had been regularly visiting her co-worker's house after work. She'd tell me she was out with friends or just putting in late hours at the office, and I trusted her completely. But her parents revealed the truth, that almost every evening, she'd head over to his place and spend a couple of hours there before coming home. We weren't naive. If she was lying to me about her whereabouts, there was no way something innocent was going on in that house. Learning about this crushed me. I loved Jocelyn deeply, honestly, a part of me still does, but finding out she had been lying and cheating for months tore me apart. This all came to light about 10 days ago, during that fateful meeting with my in-laws. I still can't forget how devastated I felt when they sat me down and told me everything. They were visibly upset too. They said they doubted Jocelyn would ever come clean, so they felt it was their responsibility to let me know. At that point, they hadn't even confronted Jocelyn about it. I was the first person they told. When they broke the news, I couldn't hold it together. I broke down right there in front of them. But instead of making me feel ashamed or weak, they comforted me like I was their own son. They reassured me over and over, saying this wasn't my fault. They'd seen firsthand how I treated Jocelyn with love and respect, and they were heartbroken that she had thrown it all away for someone she barely knew. I couldn't face going home to Jocelyn that night, so I stayed at their house. I barely slept and cried most of the night, completely shattered by everything I had just learned. Logically, I knew the next step would be to file for divorce, but my heart wasn't ready to let go of her yet. The next morning, I decided to head back home before Jocelyn left for work. I hadn't responded to any of her calls or texts the night before, so she looked surprised and concerned when I walked in. I was a mess, and it was obvious. I sat her down, told her I needed to talk, and then asked her straight out about the affair. At first, she tried to deny it, hesitating and making excuses, but then I showed her the photos her parents had given me. These pictures showed her car parked outside her coworker's house on nights when she claimed to be working late. That's when the truth came out. She admitted she'd been having an affair. The second those words left her mouth, I broke down all over again. This time was worse because I couldn't hold on to the hope that maybe her parents were mistaken. Hearing it directly from her made it undeniable. I don't remember much of what I said after that, but I do remember screaming and crying. Jocelyn started crying too, trying to explain herself. She said it had been a stupid mistake, that she'd felt bored in our marriage and had acted out. She insisted it was just a fling and didn't mean anything, but that only made it worse. If it didn't mean anything to her, why do it in the first place? She destroyed everything we'd built together for something so meaningless. I yelled about how much I had trusted her, how I'd always been there for her, and how she had thrown it all away for a guy she barely knew. By the end of it, she was on the floor, sobbing into her hands, and I was standing over her, still shouting. It was a horrible scene, chaotic, painful, and utterly surreal. Even now, thinking about it makes me uncomfortable. Nothing about that day felt normal. After everything calmed down, if you could even call it that, I told her I was done. I couldn't keep living like this, not with the betrayal so fresh. She begged me to give her another chance, promising she'd end things with the other guy immediately, but I told her I needed space. I couldn't even think clearly with her around. I couldn't take it anymore. I told Jocelyn she needed to leave the house. She argued relentlessly, insisting we could stay together and work things out. She kept saying it was the right thing to do, but I wasn't in a place to even consider what right was. I was still reeling, struggling to accept that she'd betrayed me. Sorting out the marriage or ending it felt secondary at that moment. I needed space to process, to breathe. But every second near her made me feel suffocated, disgusted. I hated her for what she'd done. When she refused to leave, I reached my breaking point. Frustrated, I told her I'd leave instead. She begged me not to go, saying it was just a mistake, that I couldn't walk away over something like this. But I couldn't even dignify that with a response. I walked out the door without packing a single thing, got in my car, and started driving. I didn't know where I was headed, and I didn't care. I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind racing and my chest tight. It wasn't until I was nearly out of gas that reality hit. I had nowhere to go. I found the nearest hotel and checked in. That's where I've been staying ever since. Things between Jocelyn and me haven't improved, not that I expected them to. No matter how hard I try, I can't forget what she did. Forgiving her feels impossible. After wrestling with the decision for days, I finally filed for divorce last week. I hadn't spoken to Jocelyn since the night I left, even though she'd been texting and calling me nonstop. The truth is, I have nothing left to say to her. What she did isn't something I can forgive or overlook. Oddly enough, my in-laws have been the ones checking in on me daily, making sure I'm okay. They've been my lifeline because, honestly, my own parents weren't much help. When I told them what happened, their advice boiled down to do what feels right. It was generic, hollow, and not what I needed at all. So, I leaned on Frank and Leah instead. Some people might think it's weird to stay close to your in-laws after filing for divorce, but they've been more like family to me than my own parents. I haven't told any friends yet, it's all still too raw. But I needed emotional support, and they've been there for me. After Jocelyn was served the divorce papers, she ramped up her messages, texting me constantly. I muted her notifications, but it didn't make the pain go away. Every day still hurt, and to make things worse, work was becoming an issue. Living in a hotel far from the office made commuting impossible, so I'd taken an unplanned leave. But my paid leave was running out, and a few days ago, my employer warned me that I'd be terminated if I didn't return soon. The stress was overwhelming. Divorce isn't cheap, and I'd need to start fresh, new house, new routine, maybe even a new job. I shared all this with my in-laws, not expecting them to fix anything but just needing someone to listen. To my surprise, they decided to step in. A few hours after I vented to them, they called and told me to come over. Jocelyn was there, and they thought we needed to talk. Not about the divorce, but about practical things like who would get the house. Jocelyn could move in with them, they said, and I could stay at the house to keep my job. At first, I didn't want to go. The thought of seeing Jocelyn again made my stomach churn. But Frank and Leah convinced me, saying they didn't want me to lose my job over this mess. Reluctantly, I agreed. When I got there, the tension was unbearable. Jocelyn and I avoided even looking at each other. For a while, no one spoke. Finally, Frank broke the silence, laying out the plan. They suggested I take the house, since Jocelyn could live with them and her job wouldn't be affected. For me, keeping the house was critical to keeping my job. That's when things took an unexpected turn. Jocelyn, out of nowhere, claimed she shouldn't have to make sacrifices because I was the reason we were getting divorced. She told her parents they were wrong for taking my side and accused me of being the cheater. The room went silent. We all stared at her, completely stunned. None of us had a clue what she was talking about. The longer the silence stretched, the more we waited for her to explain whatever absurd claim she was making. Jocelyn's tone was defiant, full of conviction. For a moment, I thought she might actually have something meaningful to say. Maybe, just maybe, she was about to own up to her mistakes and explain herself. But no, she started spewing utter nonsense. It didn't take long to realize her goal wasn't to make amends but to twist the narrative and make me look bad in front of her parents. The worst part? She was blatantly lying right to my face. Jocelyn had no idea her parents were the ones who told me about her affair. She must have assumed I hired a detective to dig up the evidence. So, she spun a wild story claiming that I had been having an affair with a mutual friend. According to her, I'd been acting too cozy with this friend during group hangouts. She even produced some doctored photos, poorly edited ones, I might add, trying to make it look like I'd been on romantic dinners with this friend. She claimed her own affair had only happened because she discovered mine and felt hurt. Apparently, her coworker had been pursuing her for months, and in her pain, she decided to get revenge by agreeing to go out with him. Jocelyn declared, with dramatic flair, that now that everything was out in the open, she expected her parents to side with her, kick me out of the house, and sever ties with me. She even accused me of manipulating them into believing my side of the story and organizing this meeting to paint myself as the victim. At that moment, I realized she'd just dug herself into a hole she couldn't climb out of. The whole thing was absurd, and I could see in her parents' eyes that they weren't buying it either. Leah, her mom, was the first to snap. She yelled at Jocelyn, calling her out for her blatant lies and those laughably bad photos. Jocelyn looked stunned. Clearly, this reaction wasn't what she'd anticipated. Her parents told her they were appalled that she'd stoop so low. They had hoped she'd at least have the decency to be honest after being caught. Leah went on to say they felt they'd failed as parents because Jocelyn had turned into someone who could lie and cheat so shamelessly. Then came the bombshell. Her parents revealed that they were the ones who told me about the affair and gave me the photos. There was no detective, no manipulation on my part, it was all them. They said there was no point in her lying because everyone already knew the truth. Jocelyn's face was priceless, she was completely blindsided. What followed was an explosive argument. Jocelyn, feeling betrayed, shouted that she hated how her parents always treated me like their son while throwing her under the bus. Her parents, on the other hand, were furious at her for what she'd done and called her out for being foolish enough not to realize that they had been the ones who exposed her. Jocelyn admitted she'd considered the possibility that they were behind it but dismissed the idea because, at the end of the day, they were her parents, and she believed they owed her loyalty, no matter what. The argument dragged on until she finally stormed out, saying she was done with all of us and didn't want to speak to anyone anymore. As I sat there processing everything, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for Jocelyn. I couldn't imagine how much it must hurt to not even have your own parents on your side. But then again, she'd put herself in this position with her lies and betrayal. After things calmed down, Frank and Leah dropped another bombshell. They told me they'd made a decision. They were going to change their will and make me the sole heir to their $2 million inheritance. They felt Jocelyn didn't deserve it and wanted me to have it instead, as a gesture of support and fairness. I was floored. The idea of inheriting that kind of money was overwhelming, but it also made me deeply uncomfortable. This wasn't just about money, it was about taking something from Jocelyn, and no matter how much she'd hurt me, it felt like a massive moral dilemma. I told them I needed time to think it over, and they assured me there was no rush. It's been days, though, and I'm still torn. Would accepting the inheritance be fair? Ethical? Jocelyn shattered our marriage, but taking away her inheritance feels like a line I'm not sure I want to cross. That's why I'm here, sharing this. Would I be the asshole if I accepted their offer and became the sole heir, taking away Jocelyn's $2 million inheritance? Update 1. Thank you so much for your comments and support. Emotionally, I'm doing okay, by God's grace, and I've started talking to my friends about the situation. They believe I should take the money. They reminded me that Jocelyn not only cheated on me but also tried to frame me as the cheater with those fake photos. Her parents might have even believed her if they hadn't already known the truth. I'm still thinking it over, but their encouragement is helping me see things a bit more clearly. Once it became clear that Jocelyn would go to any lengths to shift the blame away from herself, I realized I didn't need to hold back anymore. That's just who she is, and it's a fair assessment of her character. After a lot of reflection, I made up my mind I wasn't going to reject the inheritance. Jocelyn hadn't cared about my feelings when she was out there cheating on me and throwing away our marriage for a guy she'd barely known for a few months. So, why should I overthink this? If she wants to be mad, it shouldn't be at me. She should direct her anger at her parents, they're the ones who made this decision, not me. And frankly, I don't owe her anything anymore. Update 2. Today, I finally got back in touch with my in-laws to tell them I was ready to accept their terms. They seemed genuinely happy about it. They told me they saw this as an opportunity to make things right, given how messed up Jocelyn's actions had been. They also shared that since the blow-up at their house, Jocelyn had completely cut ties with them. She blocked them on every platform and stopped speaking to them altogether. She even handed in her 2 weeks' notice and hasn't been to work since. Apparently, her co-worker, her new partner, quit as well. I was honestly shocked. As far as I knew, Jocelyn had been groomed by her father to take over his business when he retired. She loved her job, or at least I thought she did. But now, she'd thrown it all away because she couldn't handle being held accountable for her actions. I could hear the disappointment in Frank's voice as he told me about it. No doubt, Jocelyn had sabotaged her own life, but she was still their daughter and their only child. It must have been heartbreaking for them. Still, I couldn't help but admire their integrity. They chose to stand by what they believed was right, even if it meant jeopardizing their relationship with her. Not many parents would have the strength to do that. I tried to comfort them, but words just didn't feel like enough. So, I decided to visit them tomorrow and spend some time together. I know they must be feeling lonely and hurt, and the least I can do is be there for them. Update 3. It's been a few weeks since I left the house, and I've been staying at a hotel ever since. Unfortunately, I lost my job, but Frank came through for me. He spoke to a friend of his and got me a much better position at his friend's company. So, I guess everything worked out in the end. The divorce proceedings have started, and things have been tense. Whenever Jocelyn and I meet with the mediator, it's tough to even look at her. I've heard she's already moved in with the guy she had the affair with, and they're officially dating now. I can't say I'm surprised, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting a little. We were together for a long time, and it's disheartening to see how quickly she's moved on. But clearly, I didn't mean much to her in the end. So, I'm trying to make sure she means nothing to me now either. Things with my in-laws are going well, though. None of us speak to Jocelyn anymore, and we try to avoid bringing her up because it's still a sensitive topic. It's sad, but we've found a way to create a family of our own. They haven't changed their will just yet, but they plan to after the divorce is finalized. They're adamant that Jocelyn won't find out about the changes until after they're gone. In the meantime, we're doing our best to support one another. We meet often because we all know how hard this is, and the only way to get through it is together. It's still painful, but I'm hopeful that time will heal the wounds for all of us.